I'd like to call the Education Committee to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Here.
Here. The first bill that we'll be hearing today is Senate Bill 2017 from Senator Picard. Senator Picard, would you please explain your bill to us, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I believe I've had this bill in front of you a couple of years. This is 2017, Madam Chair? Okay. This is a competency-based bill. And what this basically requires is RIDE to adopt a model dealing with competency-based learning by June 1st of 2017. So I wanted to give them some ability to do that. And competency-based or proficiency-based learning simply goes like this. If a student has enough knowledge and can demonstrate it through some type of assessment, why should they need to take that class or sit in a class to learn that when they can take that seat time and go into another class or another subject matter and become more proficient or learn something new on that? Simply, if somebody comes into your school district and has an incredible ability to read and write Spanish, why would we make them take a foreign language when they could be using that seat time to learn another subject matter? That's the base of this bill, and I'll answer any questions anybody may have.
Are there any questions of the witness? Thank you. Stephanie Geller, Steve Osborne, and Tim Duffy, if you all want to come up and take a seat. Welcome. Stephanie, do you want to start?
I think it's already up. Am I on already? Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. Before I begin the formal testimony, which I submitted in written form as well, I just wanted to say that Rhode Island Kids Count is working with a number of partners, many of whom are in the room, on a student-centered learning initiative. I'm trying to promote student-centered learning practices, including competency-based learning, more student voice, more personalization in the classroom. And so this is really a big part of what we're working on, is really clarifying policies and, when necessary, advocating to change policies so that districts and schools understand the flexibility that they do have to provide more personalization in this area. So as was said by Senator Picard, this bill would require that the Board of Education's Council on Elementary and Secondary Education adopt a competency-based learning policy and then a model district policy. Rather than reading my testimony, I'm just going to say that there already are a number of pieces in the secondary school regulations that really support competency-based learning. I'll point especially to Section 6.31 that says that LEAs shall formally adopt coursework graduation requirements that, 1, apply to all students within the LEA, and 2, require successful completion of at least 20 academic courses or the equivalent that include demonstrations of proficiency in the 6 core content areas. I think what's really important there is that it already states that you don't have to complete a course per se. You can also demonstrate proficiency. So it is in the regulations. And the regulations further state that students can meet coursework requirements through enrollment in a state-approved career and technical program, expanded learning opportunities, dual enrollment, online learning, and other non-traditional academic and career readiness programs. So it's there, but what I think is missing really is districts and schools really understanding what to do with that. It's written in the language, but it's not spelled out how they would go about doing it. So I don't think that a lot of districts and schools understand that flexibility that the regulations already offer. And I think it would be a wonderful idea to develop state policy that further clarifies that flexibility and that gives examples and models of what's happening in other states and districts in terms of how to actually implement competency-based practices. And I really think this is an important piece in terms of helping more of our students graduate from high school and be college and career ready. Students will be more engaged if they're able to spend time on courses that they're interested in, move forward when they're ready, rather than held back doing work that they already know. They'll be able to pursue their interests and spend more time in areas where they need more growth and less time in areas where they're already proficient. And I think Rhode Island is already recognized in New England and nationally as a leader in student-centered learning, and the policy we have is recognized as a strong policy. But I think there's further that we can go, and there are states like New Hampshire and Maine that are really leading the way around competency-based learning that we can learn from. And I would really urge you to look seriously at this bill and move it forward. Thanks very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. Steve Osborne from RIDE.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, Madam Chairwoman. RIDE is here to speak where we are supportive of competency-based approaches towards education. It's something that we are, as Stephanie mentioned, are very flexible with and very permissive with in our secondary regulations and also our virtual education regulations. We've been really mindful to be able to make sure that we carve and set aside space where we do not have seat time requirements and where students are able to move at their space, be able to learn in different spaces and also be able to learn at their own pace. We've also worked closely with external partners like the New England Secondary Schools Consortium, the Great Schools Partnership, to be able to help foster different models towards competency-based education. As a part of it, we have really recognized that this is an approach that helps not only our students who may be academically behind, but it also helps accelerate our advanced learners as well to be able to make sure there's an opportunity for all of our learners to advance. I think we have a lot of schools doing great work in this space. Some of the real model schools are Pontiac High School, Cumberland High School. A lot of folks doing really great, exciting things. I think we are supportive of the efforts. I think the key for us, and we look forward to working with the sponsors of legislation to figure out how we can help support competency-based education, but doing it in a way that's supportive of different models, different approaches, so communities and schools can develop the approach that makes the most sense for them moving forward.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator DePalma.
Madam Chair, more of a comment with regards to the New England Secondary School Consortium. So myself and Representative McNamara sit on that representing Rhode Island and have since they began probably 4 or 5 years ago. And I believe it's a real opportunity here to be able to, what the consortium is expected to do is leverage those capabilities and capacities in learning, not to reuse the word learning, of what other states have been trying to do. In fact, the gentleman from Maine that's been active in this is from East Providence, originally from East Providence, grew up here. He's now in Maine, been there for a while. But I think we can learn quite a bit from this and not have to reinvent a whole set of new things. And competency-based, proficiency-based learning is one of the core tenets of the goals associated with the New England Secondary School Consortium. So I'm glad we're leveraging our participation there. It's good to hear. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So it looks like we need a little bit more guidance from RIDE. Do I have a motion to hold at this point?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any nays? 2017 is held. Thank you. Next bill is 2018. Steve, if you just want to stay there, you're signed up for this next one, too. Senator Picard, would you endeavor to explain?
Sure. Once again, this is a bill that I believe you heard last year as well. Kind of call it the Blizzard Bag bill, and it's an idea about allowing school districts to submit a detailed plan to provide virtual education to students who are missing school because of inclement weather. Obviously, RIDE would have to approve such things. So just to kind of give you an idea, we know a bad day is coming up. School may be closed. A couple of options here. Students may be able to go online, access some virtual education, some lesson plans that are out there so they don't fall behind in their academics, as well as the school districts do not have to add the day at the end of the school year. For those who may not have any type of access to any computers or electronics, that type of thing, maybe an alternative plan at the same time could be provided for those students. Again, this is something that the school districts would have to come up with and give to RIDE a detailed plan, and they would have to okay it. And it may not even be on the snow day. It may be on the day during school vacation week. They say, hey, look, we missed 2 or 3 days because of whatever the cause is, bad weather, the roof leaked, the boiler systems went, that type of thing. And instead of tacking them on at the end of the school year, take a day, do the work at home, bring it in on the following school day, and we can go through it from there. It's just a way to try to keep the students in tune as we go along and keep the school year moving as well. That's the basis of the bill. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Picard? Thank you. Steve, your testimony, please.
Again, Rudd, I think we're excited to see some ideas to be able to help us come up with new solutions to addressing the issues that we faced last year, where we had a handful of schools and districts that needed waivers to be able to meet the instructional day requirement. I think that we're supportive of finding new ways to be able to support student learning, especially in some of those inclement weather cases, and whether there be something that happens at the school or physical plant. I think a lot of this, and I think a lot of the ability to implement this well is really based in the resources that exist at the school and district. So it's one of those things we look forward, and I think trying to find solutions to be able to make sure we support our schools and districts. I think some of the considerations behind this is some of our schools and districts do have one-to-one programs where students are able to bring computers home. Not all of our schools and districts. Some of our students who are in those one-to-one programs may or may not have internet access at home and may not be able to learn the same opportunities. So it's one of those things that I think the success of it and our ability to be able to fairly and equitably implement this is contingent on really trying to figure out how our schools and districts can make sure that that time is being most effectively used. Again, I think we're looking forward to try to find any solution to be able to make sure we're avoiding those last-minute waivers in May and June. So,
Thank you. Are there any questions for Steve? No questions. Okay, so at this time, Tim Duffy's still not here. Okay. Do I have a motion to hold? Moved? Seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any nays? 2018 held. Next bill is S2088, Senator Archambault. Okay, he's not here. David Raposa from AAA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is David Raposa. I'm from AAA Northeast here in Providence. We support this legislation, which would add a 90-minute parent session to the requirements for students who take driver education in order to get their learner's permit. Now, we know that traffic crashes are the leading cause of death among teens, and we also know that sustained involvement by parents, is one of the best tools out there to help kids become safer drivers. Right now in Rhode Island, the law does not require students who have their learner's permit to take any behind-the-wheel training. It's optional. It's not required. What that means is it falls really to the parents and the guardians and the caregivers to teach the teens how to drive. A program like this, we think, would do maybe three things. It would preview driver education, so the parents would know what the kids were going to be doing over the 33 hours. It would talk about the state's graduated driver licensing laws, texting laws, cell phone laws, so they know what the kids can and can't do. And then finally, it would give the parents some practical advice about how they can work with their children to become safe drivers. Now, if this passes and it would be regulated by CCRI, as they do with the rest of driver education. AAA has pledged with them to offer this program throughout the state at classroom locations from end to end, free of charge, as the legislation requires. A couple of years ago, at the suggestion of the General Assembly, it was inserted that parents should also have the option of maybe taking in an online format for 1 hour, which is perfectly doable. We're happy to do that. So with that said, this bill has been before the Senate in the past and has passed, and we hope you'll give it every consideration again this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Do I have a motion to hold at this point? Moved, held and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any nays? 088. It's being held at this point. Okay. Next bill is Senate Bill 2089 from Senator Satchel. Would you endeavor to
Absolutely.
explain it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a media literacy legislation. Media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and communicate information in a variety of forms, including print and non-print. It teaches students to apply critical thinking to media messages that are presented from a certain point of view. I think that this legislation is timely. As Mr. Osborne had mentioned, districts are going one-to-one. Districts have kids on computers all the time. We're being bombarded by ads and commercials online and things like that, and it's kind of a different world that we're in than when I was in school. So I think that this is important for kids to understand the different types of media, understand the different messages, and understand things like spin and things like that. I was approached by my former high school history teacher, who's here today, Mike Trophy, who's done a lot here in the state with social studies and civic standards. And I think that this ties in well with the civic standards. And districts are doing these programs. Districts do their own digital citizenship things. We have Digital Citizenship Week at the schools that I teach at. But we don't really have like a statewide policy where there's a requirement. So that's what I'm hoping this legislation will do.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Could Renee Hobbs, Susan, and Stanley Barron please come sit up to testify? Welcome.
Thank you.
Want to start? Renee?
My name is Renee Hobbs. I'm professor of communication studies at the Harrington School of Communication and Media at the University of Rhode Island, where I direct the Media Education Lab. I am proud to support Senate Bill 2089, which would invite RIDE to consider incorporation of media literacy into the state's basic education program. This bill will help build momentum for expanding the concept of literacy to include all forms of communication and expression that people use to create and share meaning, including print, visual, sound, and digital media. Today's young people are growing up with media, but many lack a fundamental understanding of how to use it for learning. Media literacy education, developed as early as the kindergarten years, helps children make good choices about what they watch, see, and read. For older students, media literacy education helps children understand how all media messages are constructed and all media messages offer a particular point of view. Many children in Rhode Island do not yet get exposed to media literacy education in elementary or secondary school. But with the rise of user-generated content, the ability to identify a message purpose, a target audience, and a point of view, these are essential skills for lifelong learning. In high school, media literacy helps students critically analyze media messages and develop intellectual curiosity. And now, children and young people have the ability to create and compose media using free or low-cost tools, which are increasingly available to more and more people. Although Rhode Island educators have been embracing media literacy for many years, and there are a number of important initiatives in the state which have already advanced the professional development of teachers, which is necessary in order to bring media literacy to all Rhode Island school children. Thanks to Senator Jack Reed, the University of Rhode Island's Harrington School of Communication and Media received a $475,000 grant for Media Smart Libraries, a program to support the professional development of school and public libraries. The URI Graduate Certificate in Digital Literacy and the Summer Institute in Digital Literacy, held on the Feinstein downtown Providence campus and now in its fourth year, have attracted over 400 educators from Rhode Island, 35 states, and 15 countries. Media literacy scholars and practitioners are in residence at New England Institute of Technology, Brown University, Bryant University, Rhode Island College, University of Rhode Island, and Providence College, just to name a few. Media literacy can be taught as a standalone subject, or it can be integrated into existing curriculum. Media literacy courses are now being offered at a number of Rhode Island high schools, including Beacon Charter School for the Arts, Barrington High School, Woonsocket High School, and others. At the middle school level, the Thompson Middle School in Newport has developed a community documentary project that incorporates media literacy into the language arts and social studies curriculum. Although nationally only a few elementary schools have begun to incorporate this work, Narragansett Elementary School is a pioneer in the field, and educators from this community have presented their work at national conferences. Rhode Island has the unique capacity to be a national leader in media literacy education, but only if the Rhode Island Department of Education makes it possible for all children to receive exposure to these important ideas. If this bill were to become a law, it would provide increased visibility for media literacy education at the community level, inspire school district curriculum leaders to advance and multiply their efforts, and it would support university-school partnerships that could benefit the next generation of future teachers. I offer my highest level of support for this bill, and I urge you to pass it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Susan Barron. I am a communication and media literacy professor at Bryant University. I was among the first people in the country to receive a graduate degree in media literacy and education, and I've been teaching and writing about media literacy for over 20 years. Under my supervision, and for the past 14 years, my students at Bryant have been creating and conducting media literacy workshops in the K-12 schools around the state of Rhode Island. I often ask my students, if I was your platoon leader and asked you to fight a dangerous enemy without weapons, what would you think? What would you say? I ask this question because the scenario is analogous to kids in media. Children face an onslaught of media messages every day in this country without possessing the weapons they need to immunize themselves against certain harm. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, kids are spending upwards of 7 to 10 hours per day consuming media, a lot more time than they're spending with their parents and teachers. This means that media are quickly replacing parents and educators as the most influential factors in the lives of our children. The scary thing is, kids are consuming without criticism. They willingly accept the lessons they get from powerful entities like Disney, Nickelodeon, Facebook, and a slew of other huge conglomerates. The reason is simple. They are not presented with messages to the contrary. It is a one-sided conversation, and kids are losing the battle by not being provided the critical thinking tools necessary to offer or even consider other more productive narratives. Requiring media literacy in the classroom ensures they will not only think critically about some of those more destructive messages that they consume every day, but have a fighting chance against them. And in case you were thinking that my platoon scenario was a little drastic, I'd like you to consider all the problems in contemporary childhood culture which social science has linked to media consumption. Obesity, eating disorders, low self-esteem development, normal cognitive development, attention span issues, tobacco and alcohol use, depression, anxiety, antisocial behavior, diminished academic performance, an important one here, media addiction, isolation, illiteracy, and unhealthy identity formation, to name a few. And these are all issues that will eventually impact the entire culture, the entire state, politically, economically, socially, as our children grow older. We have a society of media-savvy kids. Now let's ensure that they become media literate as well. Let's educate our kids about using the tools that are so accessible to them and which have emerged as a permanent and critical part of their world. Thank you.
Any questions?
Hello, folks. Thank you for letting me be here. I was going to talk in general about the need for a new form of literacy, but Senator Satchel said exactly what I would have said.
Thank you for not being repetitive. We appreciate that.
It isn't your granddad's Oldsmobile anymore. We are the people formerly known as the audience. The blog of an 8-year-old kid sits figuratively and literally online next to the New York Times and ABC and Fox News, which requires a new form of literacy in terms of what that student, that young person writes, but also those who are receiving that content have to have a new form of literacy for knowing what it is they're reading, such issues of credibility and the like. Again, Senator Satchel said exactly what I would have begun with, but I'll leave you with a couple things, and that is there was a reason that the Bible was kept not in English for many years, because literacy is power. The church in medieval times, as long as they were the arbiters, as long as they were the meaning makers, they had power. There was a reason the slave owners would kill slaves who could read and would jail the masters who would teach them. Our children deserve the opportunity to have power, the power of literacy, as Senator Satchel has redefined it for this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Next, Mike Trophy, Steve Osborne, and Frank Romanelli. And a big special welcome to Mike Trophy, who's my hero. He's the champion of civics education. And I apologize, I haven't seen you in a while. I didn't know you were branching out into other things, because he's the civics, he's the main man.
Could I just echo those same sentiments, Madam Chair? Senator Sheehan, welcome. Mr. Trophy.
Dealing with media literacy, media hardware, media everything. Because I go to schools a lot. I'm in schools. Matter of fact, I see Senator Miller many times in schools. But I go to schools that don't have what we're talking about. They don't have access to computers all the time. They don't have. I work in a school district. Every student has a tablet from K to 12. Right? Not every system is like that. Okay? And what we do need is a policy from RIDE that's really reasonable and well thought out. But we also need to help students understand the moral and ethical responsibilities of use of all forms of media. The second point I want to make is that there's a direct correlation with media literacy and civic education. I've only brought 2 copies of something called Media Literacy, Civic Education, and Civic Engagement. I will get everyone, I didn't realize there'd be so many, I will get everyone a copy of that this week, so I'll send it over to her and she can make copies. Okay.
Thank you, we would appreciate that.
Okay, and
We haven't had any civic goodies lately.
I know that. But one of the programs mentioned in the report is iCivics. Now, you fund iCivics. Do you know that? To the judiciary budget, the Supreme Court does iCivics, and it's in almost all school districts.
I think it's federal based.
Please?
The iCivics, is that federal based?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes, you fund it. So. But there are other programs, like I have to, Senator Miller, he works with kids in Project Citizen. And he every year, that's where we meet. And there are a lot of programs that advocate for media literacy. But the only problem is not every school has equal access. I'm engaged now in another program where I get federal dollars to do professional development. And like one school in Providence, they don't have access to computers. They have half a lab. So what good is that? So those are the kind of issues that bother me, issues of equity. And then today we're talking about digital devices. Recently there was a big thing in the front page of the paper where students in one community were sexting. One of the things we don't teach kids is the moral and ethical use of media. I think that's a very, very important issue. The final thing I say in my testimony is that what we have done as a society is akin to handing young people the keys to a car with no driving instruction and then punishing them for breaking the rules of the road. And that's why we need a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Miller.
Would we assume that any plan that was enacted through this legislation would include some guidelines for students and their parents, I hope, to understand the difference in reliability of resources that they... I would love to put the stop to or do something about it and educate people to, it must be true, I read it on the internet.
Must be true, I read it on the internet.
I think it's a real problem. It goes as far as the legislature.
It is a problem.
Yeah.
I can speak directly to the school district that I work in. And yesterday it came up there, the parent refused to have the student bring their tablet to school because they wanted the tablet. So we need to have rules for everyone, okay? But in policy, and if we have the policy, then we can work it, make it different for every community. But we need a statewide policy, and we need training for parents, for us too. So
Everybody.
I just want to acknowledge that the program that I'm involved in with him at the elementary school in my district is one of the most rewarding things I do outside of it.
Thank you.
Great knowledge among students.
Any questions, comments?
Madam Chairwoman, I think RIDE, again, recognizes both from an academic and also a student personal perspective the need to be able to get and provide both our students, our parents, and our educators more information on these topics. I think on a student personal level, in a way unlike any other moment in time, the decisions that a young student can make at the ages of 12, 13, or 14, it has the ability to stay with them in a way that just has never happened in the past. And I think we need to figure out the best way to be able to support, again, students, families, and educators in educating students on the types of dangers and pitfalls that exist out there. And then also from an academic perspective, it's really amazing the amount of information, resources that are at our fingertips compared to a generation ago. Within many of the tools that we use on a regular basis, there's really amazing ways to be able to utilize them and leverage them at no cost to students to be able to help them drill down and find and do academic-based work. Which I think is one of the biggest concerns for folks out there is there's now so much information where a generation ago there was one or two places you could go. Now there's literally millions of places and there's no way to make sure it's of a consistent level of quality. There are things that we can do to be able to make sure that we educate folks. We look forward to working with Senator Satchel on trying to figure out the best way to be able to include this work in the K-12 space and in the BEP, and I think try to figure out the right language to be able to advance that moving forward. I think we want to be able to make sure we're developing the right personalized pathways for our schools and districts, but also recognize that we don't want to add additional burdens to folks as well. So I think try to find that middle ground of how do we offer up opportunities to folks without creating new requirements for schools and districts. I would also just like to mention as well, there are some protections for students, especially for devices that come from the school and are used on the school campus, to be able to make sure that they're not accessing certain types of information, media, and things that could be harmful to students. That is a part of some of the federal programs in each of our schools and districts should have those different filters and processes in place. But again, I think we see a huge need for this and really look forward to partnering with folks to be able to make this a success moving forward.
So, Steve, does RIDE have the capacity to come up with a statewide plan?
Yeah, I think the capacity would be a challenge for us. Right now we have one person who's devoted to virtual blended technology. She also helps lead the work related to our technology conference, which I know several of you have attended in recent years. It would be a bit of a challenge, I think, to get to the depth and level for each one of our schools and districts. So it would be a bit of a challenge for us to enter that space, and considering we haven't historically been involved at that level.
Right, and then I have another question. As far as parents keeping the the tablet at home. Do you have the ability to put a filter on there so that they cannot access games?
So that is entirely a local decision. So there are different filtering products that schools and districts can buy. I just know in my professional career, there's been ones that don't allow kids to use YouTube and different social media sites and tools like that. There are ones that can block games. It's really dependent on the school and the district to be able to set up the right policies and processes behind it. I think when we had it and it was blocking YouTube and some of those tools, that actually limited our ability to be able to use that as a teaching tool. There's also a whole bunch of really funny stories about, there was this goes off topic for a second, but we had I think it was a 5th grade project on the sperm whale, and that was filtered and blocked where our kids actually couldn't visit those web pages. So there's a bit of a drawback, and I think trying to find the sweet spot of what is the right level of protection on there while still encouraging learning and exploration.
Senator Satchel.
Just a comment, if I may. I actually have 2 other bills that deal with the issue of filtering and protection, so we'll be hearing more about that.
Oh, good. What a package. Any question? Senator DePalma.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Steve, thank you for your testimony, all 3 of you. Or you haven't done it yet, so we'll thank you after. If I was to do this, what's the first thing you would do? Because if somebody looks at this, I think the first time somebody might look at this and say, I'm not certain what you're talking about, number one. Then when you start looking at it, okay, I understand what this is, and then it's like, oh my goodness. Then it becomes something, I don't know what it was, now it's everything. What's the first thing you think RIDE should do? Forget about policy. I think we need a policy, but what's the first thing RIDE should do in doing this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, I mean, the first place that I would go to is to really focus on how to use digital literacy and media literacy tools as a tool for improving teaching and learning. It is really amazing the things you can do.
If I may, Madam Chair, when you talk about digital media or media literacy or whatever tools, you think, give me specifics. I have a connotation of that, but I'm not certain it's going to match yours.
So probably about a month ago, I think I got something in a newsletter, which was it was a guide for teachers to help support students in using Google as an academic tool, where there's actually tools and different processes that you can use to be able to filter out non-academic research. You can also filter, the lesson plan that it walked through was teaching students at the perspective of the Iranian Revolution. And there's a way through Google where you can filter both to get academic stories and then also to be able to flip the search so you can get it from the Iranian perspective as well. And so it's this way to be able to teach perspectives in a way, and again, through a tool that we all use every single day, that I'll be honest, I had no idea that you could leverage it as that type of tool in a classroom.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just an added little piece on that, I know Cranston's doing a big deal. I actually took a Google Me This professional development, and there's quite a bit on there, and I was quite amazed at the level of information and how to work it. It's really amazing. As somebody who's not real good.
Madam Chair, I just want to follow up, if I may. Steve, can you send that link to, just so I'd be interested just to check that out.
Yep, absolutely. We'll send that through.
Okay, Frank. Aye.
Opportunity. There we go. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. And in the spirit of what was said earlier, Senator Gallo, I won't repeat. Being toward the end, I don't have much left to say, but I'm a career educator. I've in Rhode Island, 32 years. I began as a high school teacher, middle school administrator. Now I'm a college instructor. I am a lecturer at the University of Rhode Island in Writing and Rhetoric. I coordinate the concurrent enrollment program in our writing department for Writing 104 with 28 high schools. Rogers will join us next year. It'll be 29, and hopefully more. And I teach part-time education classes for Roger Williams University. From that perspective, and the reason I mention all that is from that perspective, I see the value of digital literacy at all levels. I do professional development with the teachers in the early college program. They're eager to learn. We focused our theme last year into this year on digital literacy. Everything from a day together, sharing experiences and knowledge about digital literacy, to a webinar coming up next month where they will voluntarily join me online to talk about the different things that they're doing in their classrooms. visiting the 28 high schools that I've worked with, I've seen such a wide array of resources available from everything to nothing. And I really see the students who are engaging as makers and as doers in digital literacy, as learners that will have the competitive edge when they go into the workplace, will have the critical thinking skills and creative skills to be more successful in their life's relationships, and who have the sense of responsibility that goes with using digital literacy because they're using it for useful and responsible purposes. So I can't stress enough how valuable I see this bill and how exciting it would be to see this bill be part of a solution of lessening what people call the digital divide and giving all of our students more opportunities to be competitive and to be successful. Thank you.
So, are there any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking time out of your day for us. Pam Stager and Tracy Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair, especially for saying my name correctly. I appreciate that. Thank you, members of the committee, for staying so long to hear all of our testimony today. I'm Pam Stager. I'm a writer, a prevention specialist, a consultant, and a researcher. My interest in media literacy began in the 1990s when, as a prevention specialist working on many of the ills that our children face that Susan so well identified earlier, I realized that no matter how good a program I could create in the schools in which I was working, mostly middle schools and high schools, the minute they walked out of the door of the schools and put on their headphones or went home and turned on the TV, they were getting much sexier, much glitzier messages that almost always said, or often said, exactly the opposite of the kinds of things I was trying to teach them about self-esteem, about good body image, about substance abuse prevention, violence prevention. And that is what made me look like, well, what do we do about that? How can we inoculate our kids against this media that brings so many negative messages to them? So I started searching online, which is what I was doing as a media savvy person, and I found this Media Literacy Scholars Program in LA, and I called up Elizabeth Toman and said, do I have to come out to LA to study about this? And she said, boy, are you in luck. There's a Dr. Renee Hobbs who's doing the same scholars program at Babson University right in your neighborhood in Massachusetts, and you can go there. So I took a scholars program with Dr. Hobbs, and then through Dr. Hobbs, I did media literacy training for teachers throughout the state of Texas during a textbook adoption year, because they had integrated media literacy, believe it or not, into their curriculum back then in like 1999, 2000. And we were going down to tell the teachers exactly what it was about because they didn't know what it was. And so doing presentations to them about what media literacy was, I can't tell you how exciting it was to, in every single one where I was in a ballroom, you can't believe how they treat their teachers down there, right, Renee? In a ballroom on a weekend that they were doing all these workshops with great meals and 4-star hotels. And I would have 300 or 400 teachers there, and I'd be doing my dog and pony show about media literacy to see the light bulbs start going off, teacher after teacher after teacher, where they realized that the fright that they had had, that their students knew how to push buttons better than they did, they finally realized that their students didn't know how their buttons were being pushed as well as their teachers did, and that they had something to tell them about the media that they were using. So that was really an exciting thing, and I was more and more determined to bring media literacy here to Rhode Island. And the timing was perfect because in 2000, federal funding, which was a combination of DOE and the health department and something else. It was a weird combination. Made the first money for grant funding for media literacy, in this case as a violence prevention tool, available. And I applied for it. As a preventionist, I always felt that working in middle schools and high schools on violence prevention or substance abuse prevention was too late. So I put my money where my mouth was, and I wrote a proposal for bringing media literacy into the elementary level. Not only that, but having gone to a number of media literacy national conferences, I knew that most of my colleagues were working at the college, high school, and middle school level, and I thought my proposal might stand out if it was for the elementary level. It got funded. It brought about $500,000 to the Providence School Department, and for 3 years, I introduced students, parents, and teachers into media literacy principles of accessing, analyzing, evaluating. Senator Miller, it's a big part of media literacy, evaluating the the messages. At the very lowest level, like at kindergarten, what we taught kids is, does this message tell me something or sell me something? And I can't tell you that starting in September 2001, how incredibly timely it was, because as you all know, within a week or two of the start of school, September 11th happened. And my daughter, living in New Jersey, knowing that part of my media fasting at the time was not watching the morning news, called me to tell me to turn it on anyway. And we watched the second plane go into the second tower. And after I got over my initial shock, I said, I got to get off the phone, hon. I've got to call first all the principals I'm working with at the elementary level to tell them to go around and tell the teachers not to put the TVs on, and then to call the district to tell them to start creating a message to send to both teachers and parents about how to talk to your children about these messages. What we found out later was that elementary school kids, when they saw the clip at home, that parents were sitting there watching nonstop for days afterwards, they thought 300 planes were going into 300 buildings. And high school students laughed because they had seen those kind of things in movies so often they thought it was another movie. That's a principle of media literacy, that different audiences react to the same media message in different ways. I want to tell you personally how lucky we are to have a resource like Dr. Renee Hobbs in the state right now at URI. I was so excited when she took the position there and that she came to our state. And this would be a great time to have the Department of Ed consider media literacy, because we have one of the national experts in our state, and it would go a long way to making it really good. So I think that I simply want to end with a personal story. Not only was I trying to spread the media literacy word professionally as much as possible during those years after I discovered it, I also did it personally. And one day my daughter called me to say, Mom, just in case you didn't think your media literacy training with the grandkids wasn't working, this morning, Kevin was trying to get Alex, then 3, to come up from the basement where he had the TV on to get breakfast so he could get ready to go to his daycare center and they could go to work. And he kept yelling and yelling, and finally he went, Alex, turn poo off and come up and have breakfast right now. And Alex yelled back, it's not poo I'm watching, Daddy. It's another poo commercial trying to sell me the next poo. So he got the difference between is trying to tell me something or sell me something. Thank you so much for your attention.
Any questions? Thank you. Tracy. Button up.
So am I on? I think I'm on. Yeah. So I wanted to address a couple of the questions that you had from the point of view of both parent and teacher. Because media literacy, I think, is a huge part of what I want my children to understand growing up. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and tell you from a teacher's point of view. I have been at conferences put on by RIDE. I've been to the digital literacy conferences and lots of professional development over here. And Senator Miller, the question that you asked about credibility is one that every single teacher at how do I teach my students to Google something and understand what it is that they're looking at? I think asking RIDE to make that an integral part of what we teach in every classroom is a really important, really forward-thinking step that our state can take. Largely because, the second thing that I wanted to address is the one-to-one environments that are happening in a lot, but not all of our schools. So there is sort of an inequity imbalance going on there with students who are given computers and students who aren't necessarily given computers. I honestly feel that that's very much a moot point, because whether or not the school district is providing this access for students, many of them have it, so they do, and I really liked the giving them a car without teaching them how to drive first analogy, that these are students who need to understand media literacy, regardless of whether or not they're in that particular school district. And then the other thing that I wanted to address, Senator Gallo, was a lot of what you were talking about is, do we have these sort of filters in place to protect our children with the internet? Because there's a lot of big scary out there. My children, all three, got iPads this year. And the best approach that I feel in that filter situation is not putting filters on the computer, but teaching the students to be the filter. Teaching them to look at things critically. And that's sort of what everyone has really talked about here. But if they're the filter, it doesn't matter what kind of firewalls we put into place. They understand how to think critically around things. And I think that's an essential skill going forward for absolutely everyone. I also feel it's a skill that even my own generation, we didn't have that sort of access. As parents, it's very difficult to teach that to our children because we're not necessarily aware. I think pushing the Department of Education to make that a priority would be a really strong move. And then the very last thing that I wanted to point out also has to do with equity, that students who have access to this machine that lets them access all of the big, scary outside world, the frightening part about a computer is you don't know who's on the other end of that computer, but that, as an educator, is incredibly liberating. Because you may be sitting in a classroom in Central Falls where there's peeling paint and everything is not what you would best hope for your child to be sitting in, but if they've got that Chromebook sitting in front of them, they also can be whatever they want to be. So they can market themselves. They can create a YouTube identity. They can create and recreate themselves as often as they need to, as long as they have the structure in place to understand what they're doing and how to do it in a way that is positive. So I think it would be an incredible step forward for our Department of Education to be able to push to have this sort of curriculum in place within the districts. I think it would be great to have certification for our teachers to really empower the teachers who know and understand what they're doing, so that they can lead in that situation. So I'm largely in favor of the bill, simply because I think it's a really great step forward for our state.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Thank you very much. I have to say thank you to everyone tonight. I, much like Senator DePalma, didn't really know much about this media or any of it, and I learned a lot tonight, and I want to welcome Professor Hobbs. I had no idea that you were nationally known and everything else, so I apologize for calling you by your first name. I try to make it more warm and cozy in here because sometimes it's a little overwhelming. So I do apologize, Professor, but welcome and thank you to everyone who testified tonight. It was very interesting for me and I think for everybody here. So, a motion to hold. Seconded. And going forward, hopefully we can get all the information that we need and help RIDE out and we can see it again at a later time and pass that. But thank you for your time. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion been seconded.
From the hold? Or what?
We already did it. Thank you.